Getting my stream started here on YouTube. I'm just waiting for it to come live. Okay, I can see the image coming up on YouTube right now. And hopefully the stream starts. All right, we are in business. Welcome to Write With Me, session number 35, where I'm working on part of my Escape to Australia series. And I'm working on the book today called Harbour Lights in Sydney. It's a romance based in Australia where a woman, Darla, leaves her life in Minneapolis for Sydney to find love? No, she just goes there for work, but she just happens to find love, and things get really interesting. I'm going to be working on Chapter 4, the Meet Cute scene today, and I dictate all my books, or at least I try to dictate all my books. I've got my microphone here, I've got my headset, and I just use my iPad. Here, I'll show you. And I just record the audio on the iPad and just copy the transcription out, and then I begin working on my book, and that's how I edit my books. All my romance books can be found at aaronbelsing.com, and you can check out my Maui Desire series, as well as my thrillers at aaronrlinsdau.com, somewhere there like Black Ice, which is a freebie. So let's get started with this Write With Me session. And get started here. Yeah. Harbour Lights in Sydney, Chapter 4. Darla woke up early, still struggling to adapt from the jet lag that she'd been suffering through. She told herself just a day or two more of getting up early and walking in the neighborhood, and she would be just fine. It was Monday, a work day, and she knew she needed to get up early, so she had woken up at 5:30 because she was planning to take the ferry across to see the harbor, something that she hadn't gotten to explore. As she got her coffee taken care of and got herself all dressed up, she had her white blouse and her beige slacks on to take the trip across. She decided to wear sensible shoes. She just wore running tennis shoes because her company is a athletic leisure apparel brand, and she knew that as a brand manager for Fit for People clothing that she was very proud of, that she actually needed to fit the part. She talked with Tegan, her coworker that she was taking over for, and she said this is exactly how people dress up. So she didn't want to step out as the awkward person. As she walked along in the morning, looking at the apartments and different cars in Manly, the community that she was staying in, she enjoyed the scent of the breeze coming off the ocean, the smell of the salt, and the sand that filled her nostrils. As she walked to the harbor ferry, she saw that she was just in time. She walked in and purchased her ticket at the machine, then walked up to the gates where they had little red plastic blockades. She slipped her ticket in, and the machine accepted it. It beeped, and the red plastic gates opened. She was through. As she walked up to the harbor, she saw the green-bodied ferry with the yellow top waiting, and everybody was piling in. She increased her footsteps to catch the ferry. She didn't want to miss this one. Ended up being late for work. So holding on to her brown coach purse, she began walking and merging into the crowds, piling into the dock. As she walked along the concrete, she heard the call of seagulls and the murmur of people as they continued loading up on the ferry. She walked over the yellow steel planking and onto the bulky ferry boat and made her way through the crowds and up to the top of the stairs. She didn't want to miss the scene. Within a few minutes, the ferry blew its horn and began backing out. She hadn't been on a ferry in a very long time, not since she was a child when her parents took her to the Puget Sound area, where she rode in the ferry from Anacortes over to San Juan Island. She vaguely remembered it. This was a completely different experience. As the ferry backed out and began moving across the water, the breeze began swirling several women's hair, and she was happy that she'd tightened hers in a bun and put a hair grabber in the back of her head. That way it didn't swirl all around, so by the time she showed up at work, she wouldn't look like a mess. As the ferry accelerated and began pushing her back into her seat, she was amazed at how fast it went across the water, heading for the harbor, or heading across Sydney Harbor. As people talked excitedly about the trip, a couple were tourists. She could hear from what they were talking about, but most people were actually commuting into the city, just like herself. She had her phone out ready as the Sydney Harbor Bridge and the Opera House came into view. As they slowly loomed larger, coming off the horizon and the boat ducking under the bridge, she filmed it, excited to share the video with family. That bridge and the Opera House were the most iconic locations in all of Australia, she thought, other than the kangaroos and koalas she hadn't seen yet. As the ferry arrived at the dock, she made her way down, stood up off the benches and made her way down in the crowds as the commute groups began disembarking from the boat. They walked down the yellow steel planking, clanging along as she walked across it, and made her way into downtown Sydney. She pulled up her phone after taking a couple of pictures and pulled up her Maps app and punched in the location of her office. A 10-minute walk. That was perfect. She had the chance to film and walk and experience downtown Sydney and all of the people who commuted in and worked. She was thrilled, the excitement giving her goosebumps, and the energy began buzzing in her mind of she was literally commuting in Sydney like a regular Australian worker. And she thought, oh, maybe I need to work on my Australian accent. She laughed at that. Once she found the office building, she looked up at the high-rise, the multiple stories of the glass tower arcing above her. Oops. And she enjoyed the feeling of it. In many ways, to her, it looked like downtown Minneapolis with the high-rises, just with different accents and different graphics. She thought about the Baskin-Robbins she had passed over in Manly as she was walking to the wharf and laughed, thinking, I came all the way to Australia only to see Baskin-Robbins. As she walked into the office building, she met the security guard and told her that she was going up to Fit for Life company, and where to go. And the man pointed her to the elevator and told her, yes, you need to go up to the 11th floor there. You have a pass and everything. She showed her work badge to the man, and he nodded and let her pass. Once in the elevator, she was crammed in with several other people talking in deep accents and a few light ones. A few she didn't recognize. This was more of an international city than she realized. As the door dinged to the 11th floor and slid open, she walked out and walked down the hallway. In a moment, she was in the entrance to Fit for Life brand, and there was a woman standing at the doorway. Darla, thank you very much for coming halfway around the world to work here to cover for Tegan. We really appreciated you. The perky young brunette woman in a athleisure outfit, one from Fit for Life for You company. Darla was surprised that the woman was actually wearing the outfit. Uncontrollably, she looked up the young woman up and down, and Cassidy said, "Oh, sorry, this isn't my normal office affair." Let's see, Cassidy. This isn't my normal office apparel. Writing some notes down here. And she said, I've got a photo shoot today, and hopefully you'll be able to work with me on it. But I wanted to bring you in just to show you around. And we've actually got a meeting with one of the gyms that we were partnering with. Just then, out of the corner of her eyes, she saw movement, and Tegan was walking towards her, and she called out, Darla, so good to see you. I'm glad you made it across the harbor okay. Did you enjoy the ferry ride? Darla was still grinning from ear to ear of the experience of seeing the famous opera house on the bridge, and she told Darla and Cassidy, yes, actually, that was an incredible ride. I don't know if I would ever actually want to commute around. Cassidy laughed and said, oh, that's probably a good choice. Sometimes that traffic can become quite unpleasant. If you have the time and the energy, the ferry ride is always more enjoyable. If you'll excuse me, Darla. Cassidy left Darla and then headed down the hallway, and Tegan escorted her into the office space and began showing her around. Tegan showed her office cubicle, one with a slight view outside of the city, and Tegan invited Darla to stand up at the window and just take the view in. Darla, thinking about it, asked, do you mind if I take some pictures from her? Tegan shrugged and said, of course. I couldn't imagine you wouldn't, and send them to the people at the home office. It'd be fun to compare notes. I know we do Zoom calls, but this is totally different. Darla slipped her phone out of her back pocket and began snapping away, taking both photos and videos of the scenery, and then turning around, she looked at Tegan with raised eyebrows, and Tegan nodded wordlessly, assenting that yes, you need to take photos of everything that's actually part of your job, was the implication. As Darla took several photos of the office, she said to Tegan, actually, your cubicle setup in your office design is much better than ours. I'm going to suggest this when I get home. I love the open layout much more than the boxed-in setup we have. We're absolutely going to make some changes. Tegan smiled at her and said, oh, perfect. Let's go meet a couple people, and we'll introduce you to the team or we'll introduce you to my team. I'm sure it's going to be a whirlwind of names, and we'll do our best to accommodate, as most people wear their badges around here for security. Darla looked down and realized she didn't have a name badge, and as she looked up, Tegan knew what she was doing and said, oh, don't worry, we've got a badge for you printing from Human Resources. We'll have that available in our meeting. Tegan escorted Darla around the staff room and began introducing her to people. And as Darla discovered very quickly, being the only woman with an American accent, she stood out and everybody was friendly and courteous. Most of the staff were female, but several were men, and she enjoyed the mix of people. Some had regular business attire and polos on, while others were sporting the Fit For You Life. Let's see. The Fit For You Life brand apparel. She asked one man about it and the shirt, and he said, "Oh, I love this. When we got the new design from your office and we had that shipped over, I can't help but wear these everywhere." Darla laughed and said, "Well, it certainly doesn't hurt to advertise the product that we all work for." The attractive man agreed and said, "Absolutely," in a sexy curl your toes Australian accent. Darla couldn't help but notice the man as she looked him up and down and realized just how athletic looking he was. Then, as she looked around the office, she noticed most everyone was. This was a very different experience than when she walked around Minneapolis, and she thought long and hard about the different cultures and structure of the people. And she asked Tegan, "Are most people this slim and trim and athletic here?" Tegan took her to the side and said, "Yes, we really try and select people not only based on skill, but on the image we want to portray. I know America is having a bit of struggle with that. And Tegan paused, and at that, Darla raised her eyes and nodded and said, it's kind of sad. That's why we make our brand, to get people to think about themselves, their body, and how they maintain, and maybe to help people out. I know it's a wonderful thing, Tegan said. She glanced down at her watch and said, ooh, we've got the fitness chain lunch meeting coming up in a few minutes. Shall we go to the conference room? Absolutely. The two women walked down the hallway as everyone else in the office space hurried themselves this way and that, most staring at computers and clicking. Darla thought, other than for the wider open space and the more daylight pouring in from outside, she could be in any office building in the United States and not have any difference and know it. Tegan introduced Darla to the office manager, Jeanette. And the two exchanged pleasantries for several moments before Jeanette also looked down on her phone and said, or at her Apple Watch and said, oh, we've actually got the luncheon with the staff and also the local fitness chain that we're looking to work with as well. Oh, that's what Tegan said, Darla mentioned. Perfect, shall we? And Jeanette led Tegan and Darla down the hallway. As they entered the conference room, several staff members that Darla already recognized were sitting in there, but there was one man staring outside the window on his phone talking a bit. He looked very familiar. Jeanette grabbed her attention and said, yeah, you'll actually sit here. We're going to have you at the head of the table because we're going to have you taking Tegan's position and lead this. Even though this is lunch, we're going to throw you in the deep end. I trust that you'll be able to handle it. And Darla said, of course, that's why they bring me all the way across the world, right? Sure thing. Where do we grab our lunches? And Jeanette said, oh, they're catered. They'll bring them into us. We've got a really nice setup. Oh, wonderful. Jeanette ushered Darla down to sit there and sit at the head of the table with Jeanette beside her and Tegan across. Just then the man clicked off the phone and turned around, and Darla froze as he turned around and made eye contact. Her mouth opened partially as her skin turned to liquid fire. An energy rose up in her heart, and it began thumping wildly, and her mouth went dry. The man looked at her and smiled and said, oh, my dance partner, in a moderate Australian accent. Darla stared at the man for several moments, and Tegan looked at her and said, is everything okay? At that, Darla shook her head and said, oh my gosh, I met you on, and he said the promenade at Manly Beach, right? He immediately strode over to Darla with his hand out. She involuntarily pushed her chair back and stood up and shook the man's hand. His muscular grip didn't crush her hand. She gave a good press back, but she could feel the strength and energy in him. Oh, pleasure to meet you, Darla. My name is Hugo. Hugo Archwald. Pleasure. Darla stared into the man's eyes. Her palms began sweating as she held his hand. Unable to control her perspiration, she looked down for a moment, then back to the man's eyes. His water blue eyes completely captivated her, and she said, "I'm Darla Bennington, pleasure to meet you. At that he smiled, released her hand, and then sat a couple seats down from Tegan, taking the place that already had his laptop ready. At that, Darla sat back down in her seat, happy that she'd put on extra deodorant. She reached her hands under the table and very carefully and stealthily, I'll work on that, wiped the sweat off of her hands. She couldn't believe that she literally was staring in the eyes of the attractive man who she had encountered. Jeanette looked at Hugo and said, "Hugo, what do you mean by dancing?" He looked at Darla with raised eyebrows and a cocked head and said, "Darla and I met on the walkway and we did the dance where she goes one way, I end up going the other. We did that a couple times. It was actually pretty funny." Wasn't it? At that, Darla choked out a laugh and said, "Yes. Sorry, I'm completely caught off guard that I get to meet somebody who's doing business. And you are the..." Hugo smiled and said, I'm the man who runs the fitness company. I've got a chain of 16... gyms around Sydney, and I'm looking to expand into Brisbane and Melbourne as well. Fit for All seems like a nearly, well, he paused laughing, a perfect fit for the Fit For You brand, don't you? Darla admitted, "I haven't had a chance to review it. Sorry, I'm still a little bit on the jet lag coming all the way around the world." "Well, that's perfect," Jeanette said. "I think we'll be able to get along just fine." Just then the caterers walked into the room. Ooh. Just then the catering team walked into the room, breaking the mild tension, and Jeanette stood up and said, "Oh, lunch has arrived. Thank you very much." At that, everyone broke into chatter, and Tegan leaned over and whispered into Darla's ear, "Is that... let's see, what would she say? So that's the hunky man that you fell in love with and were getting ready to marry? You wouldn't do too badly. He is set. This guy is like a coup for us." Darla whispered back, "You didn't tell me that this isn't like some regular gym accountant. He is incredible." I know, Tegan said. "Too bad I'm married otherwise." And she trailed off as Jeanette and the catering crew began passing out the lunches. Hugo looked over at Darla and smiled, and he raised his sandwich and said, "Well, to dancing partners." As Jeanette set a sandwich in front of her, and she raised it as well and said, "Absolutely, Hugo." The room descended into animated conversations about their brand, about the day, and about what they were going to do from the week. Darla kept glancing at the man, and he glanced back at her and smiled more than once. A heat rose up in her that she hadn't felt in a very long time. Perfect. Okay. Done. Alrighty. Analytics. Let's see. We've got the live stream here. I have 23 minutes of dictation. Let me copy that over into my software, Scrivener software here. Okay, copy, and we'll put that in Scrivener and see how the word count went today. Whoa! 3,173 words. I think we got a winner here, folks. Perfect. So that's how I do it. This is a Write With Me session number 35, working on chapter number 4 of the Escape to Australia series. In this book, Harbour Lights in Sydney is part of a romance, and now you've met the meet cute where Darla is completely caught off guard at Hugo, who she happened to almost bump into on a walkway on Manly Beach, one of the beautiful beaches in the Sydney area. Completely romantic, fully entertaining location. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Aaron R. Linsdau. You can check out my thriller books over there at aaronrlinsdau.com. And also, please check out my romance books at aaronbelsing.com, where you'll be able to find Harbour Lights in Sydney by the time you watch this video, hopefully. And check it out. I've got a lot of entertaining stuff, and I've got many more live streams coming. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.